Hello friends, welcome to our channel. In today's session, we're going to dive into some of Excel's most powerful logical functions, the if with and, if with or, and ifs function. These functions are incredibly useful for decision-making in your spreadsheets. Let's get started. In the first sheet, we have a data, which has student name, score, and attendance percentage. Based on these three fields, we would explore the usage of if condition and other use case. First on our list is the if function. It's like a mini decision maker right inside your spreadsheet. Here's the syntax on the screen for your reference. The if function in Excel is used to make logical comparisons. It takes three arguments: a condition, a value if the condition is true, and a value if the condition is false. In our formula, B2 greater than or equal to 75 is the condition. This checks if the score value in cell B2 is greater than or equal to 75. The second argument is pass. This is the value that will be returned if the condition is true. In other words, if the value in B2 is 75 or more. The third argument is fail. This is the value that will be returned if the condition is false. That is, if the value in B2 is less than 75. This formula can be very useful in criteria-based numerical validation and also text-based validation. Now we are applying this formula to all the rows, simply by selecting the below rows and pressing Ctrl key with D. Now we got the results on all the rows. In second method, in cell E2, we are going to apply the same formula by pointing the cell reference of the criteria updated in sheet help. This would help us to replace 75, pass, and fail with any other number or text that suits our needs. As you can see here, we have used the number condition as 90, value for true criteria as approved, and value for false criteria as not approved. I am just locking the appropriate cell reference in this formula to ensure that it works fine when we apply this formula on all the rows. Now we are applying this formula to all the rows, simply by selecting the below rows and pressing Ctrl key with D. Now we got the results on all the rows. Now in cell F2, we are going to use the if formula with the and condition. Here is an example. In our formula, in cell F2, B2 less than or equals 59 is the condition. The second argument is fail. This is the value that will be returned if the condition is true. In other words, if the value in B2 is 59 or less. The third argument is another if function. This is where things get interesting. We are adding the and criteria to test more than one conditions at once. This if function checks if the value in B2 is between 60 and 100, inclusive. If it is, it returns pass. If not, it returns out of boundary. We got the result in the first row. We are applying this formula to all the rows, simply by selecting the below rows and pressing Ctrl key with D. Now we got the results on all the rows. Now we are testing the formula by changing the score value as 101. We got the result as out of boundary in column F. It ensures that by any chance if the value is beyond 100, it can be easily identified with the help of this formula. To summarize the formula, we can say that if the value in cell B2 is 59 or less, return fail. If the value is between 60 and 100, return pass. If the value is outside this range, return out of boundary, or we can use alternate text stating invalid score. Now we are going to use the if formula with the or criteria. Here is an example. In our formula in cell G2, the or function returns true if any of the conditions are true. It checks two conditions. The first criteria. It checks if the value in cell D2 is not equal to fail. The second criteria. It checks if the value in cell C2, which is attendance percentage, greater than or equal to 80. The second argument is satisfactory. This is the value that will be returned if the condition is true. In other words, if the value in D2 is not fail or the value in C2 is 80 or more. The third argument is unsatisfactory. This is the value that will be returned if the condition is false. That is, if both conditions in the OR function are false, the value in D2 is fail, and the value in C2 is less than 80. To summarize, this formula is saying, if the value in cell D2 is not fail, or the value in cell C2 is 80 or more, return satisfactory. If not, return unsatisfactory. This formula can be very useful in scenarios like performance evaluations where you want to assign a status based on multiple criteria. You can replace arguments with your preferred numbers or text that suits your needs. In the second sheet, we have a data, which has student name and score. Based on these two columns, we would explore the usage of IFS function. The IFS function in Excel is used to evaluate multiple conditions in order. It is mainly used for categorizing or grouping data, grading systems, or performance evaluations based on certain ranges. It's like an upgraded version of nested if. It takes pairs of arguments, a condition, and a value if the condition is true. It checks each condition in the order they are listed and returns the corresponding value for the first true condition. If none of the conditions are true, it returns an error. This function is a much cleaner alternative when you have multiple conditions, and it is easier to read. Here's the syntax on the screen for your reference. Let's walk through with an example. Let's evaluate this formula in cell C2. In our formula, we have 4 conditions. First condition checks if the value in cell B2 is less than or equal to 50. If true, it returns the value as group D, which indicates that the value is in the range between 0 to 50. Second condition checks if the value is less than or equal to 70. If true, it returns the value as group C, which indicates that the value is in the range between 51 to 70. Third condition checks if the value is less than or equal to 90. If true, it returns the value as group B, which indicates that the value is in range between 71 to 90. Fourth condition checks if the value is less than or equal to 100. If true, it returns the value as group A, which indicates that the value is in range between 91 to 100. We just applied the formulas on all the rows. The results indicates that we have got the different group name, as per the specified criteria. In cell D2, we have applied the same formula using the second approach by providing the individual cell reference for each criteria exist in sheet help, as we see on the screen. It would help us to change the grouping scale and the respective grouping text at any time that suits as per our requirements. If we want to eliminate any specific grouping scale, we have to eliminate that criteria in our formula. Similarly, if we want to include a new criteria in the formula, we could include that by adding new criteria number and criteria text in the help sheet. Here you could see that I am building the formula step by step by selecting the individual criteria value and criteria text. Here I am locking the cell reference appropriately to ensure the formula works correctly on all the rows. Now we are applying this formula to all the rows, simply by selecting the below rows and pressing Ctrl key with D. Here we go. We got the results on all the rows. Here on the screen, I have provided some alternative grouping scale text we could use as per our requirements. That's it for today's tutorial. Hope this video is useful. Thank you for watching. We see you in the next video.